I love this picture of a cat out in nature, relaxed, attending to their hygiene in the fastidious way they have. Hello, I'm Madeleine Innocent. I'm a professional homeopath in Australia. Cats have always been part of my life. I love their elegance, their stealth, their way they live life on their terms, the effortless way they have of being in two worlds, the physical and the non-physical. As Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher, remarks, cats are Zen masters. And a cat who trusts us and enjoys our company offers us a true complement of where we're at in our personal development. I came to homeopathy because of one of my cats. What a perfect teacher she was. She had developed an itchy skin condition. The vet solution of trying various drugs either had no effect or made her irritable. So I stopped the drugs as I felt the itch was worse for me than it was for her. Discussing this with a new friend, she suggested I try homeopathy. I had no idea what this was, but as it was a holistic healthcare, in keeping with my growing interest, I approached the homeopathic vet she suggested. This was George MacLeod, who has written so many books on the subject. He let the veterinary side of his practice go after he benefited so much from homeopathy himself. And he was still working in his 80s when he died. It was a distance consultation, and he asked me odd questions that had nothing to do with her skin. He sent me a remedy with instructions. Within a short time, her skin had completely cleared up, never to return, and she retained her sweet, affectionate nature. To say I was hooked is an understatement, but it was some years before I had the opportunity to study it. Homeopathy is a true holistic healthcare system. By that I mean everything in the life of the patient must be considered and evaluated before an effective prescription can be made. What are they sensitive to? What have they been affected by? What have they been traumatised by? What have any past issues been? What are their thermal preferences? And of course, we have to consider what is normal and natural for the species. And we have to look at the diet. So my aim here today is to consider the main areas that affect cats in a big way, big enough to unbalance their innate ability to remain healthy. Everyone has disability. You could call it the immune system, or chi, prana, lots of names. Homeopaths call it the vital force. Whatever you call it, it's an intangible part of everyone. You can't see it, measure it, or quantify it. All you can do is to appreciate its effect. I consider there are three main areas that affect this in everyone and their health, including cats. And they're the living conditions, the diet, and healthcare. So interestingly, these are in keeping with the new science of epigenetics. Epigenetics consider that a large part, that's 80 or 90% of our health, is a result of our environment, leaving 10 to 20% down to our genetic inheritance. Even more interesting is that you can put that 10 to 20% genetic part into dormancy by keeping the environment right for the species. So you can look to the wild for most of the answers, and that's where I look. The most important living conditions for cats is where they evolved, i.e. out in the wild. There they have freedom, something we all thrive with. They follow natural laws. They are intrinsically in tune with everything that goes on in that environment. They are exquisitely sensitive to everything, something we can barely comprehend. So being outside at least some of the time is, I feel, a prerequisite for cats' good health. But obviously safety issues also need to be considered. If you live in a house with a garden or a backyard, you can either fence this off or apportion, making a catio. They may not have the freedom of their wild cousins, but they can feel the sun on their fur and the earth beneath their feet, both of which are so healing. Even for people living in high-rise flats or apartments, if you have a balcony, you can fence that in. Of course, no cat will jump off a high-rise wall intentionally, but they can get distracted by a passing insect or leaf and forget it's there. So you do need to fence it off with netting and with maybe a roof. At least then they can get the sun. And if you can't do any of these things, you may be able to train your cat to accept a harness, which most hate, and then go for walks somewhere quiet in a natural area. Just be careful of areas that have been sprayed with that deadly weed killer glyphosate, and now others are coming on the market. So the best thing to do to find that out is to ring up your local shire or council. Other considerations include allowing them to find places where they feel safe, such as when visitors come, when they're scared, or from noises, or being chased or attacked by other animals in the household, or by boisterous children. Dark, small bolt holes are ideal, such as a box in a closet or wardrobe, or under a bed next to a wall. Mostly, I find cats don't like noise, so the idea of leaving a radio on all day for them may be more for your peace of mind than any positive effect it has on your cat. My recommendation here is to allow your cat to express their preferences and then try to understand what they're telling you. It really is quite easy when you consider them as a worthy, independent being with individual needs. Okay, let's get into the diet. And I've got these ingredients listed from a popular cat food. Poultry byproduct, yellow corn, wheat meal, soybean meal, animal fat, natural flavours, salt, various fish meal, yucca extract, taurine, potassium chloride, zinc sulfate, potassium iodide, manganese sulfate, copper sulfate, BHA and citric acid, various vitamins, biotin, D-calcium pantothenate, DL-methionine. Do you know what most of them are or what they do? And do you know any of the hazards that might be related to them? Few people even look at the ingredients, let alone understand them, and I think it's quite sobering. And the only meat in that list is a byproduct, and a byproduct is meal, which is waste from slaughterhouses. So they go to a rendering plant. So all the waste mixed up with lots of other things. So I would say most people would not consider that terribly nutritious. But I don't think anyone's going to argue that cats are carnivores, and obligate carnivores at that. But just look at the ingredients on a typical commercial cat food. The largest amount of most of them are plant-based food, usually in a processed form, such as isolated soy or pea protein. And of course, that may be genetically modified. If you're lucky, there's going to be some animal protein in there, but much of it is really poor quality. The rejects from the more lucrative human market. Feathers are now being heralded as a wonderful new protein for cats with allergies. Yeah, go figure. Fat is usually high, even up to 50%. I don't think there's much fat on this cheetah. Because the manufacturers know full well that this is poor quality nutrition, they add in minerals and vitamins and make a big deal out of it to appease the unsuspecting public. Fortified with added vitamins and minerals, the label shrieks. The thing is, if the food was good quality, you don't need to add anything. So they're really admitting their food is poor quality. And it's not just that, but it's the synthetic, isolated supplements made in a laboratory from petrochemicals. It's cheap as chips, but it's not food. At best, your cat will excrete them, and at worst, they'll accumulate, causing chronic disease the vets have not been trained to recognise. So far, we've only talked about some of the ingredients of commercial cat food. The processing is a whole different matter. It's cooked under high pressures and temperatures in an effort to kill off pathogens that have been allowed to contaminate the food, if you can call it that, because of poor hygiene and storage conditions. Judging by the number of pet food recalls, that of course you may not hear about unless you follow Truth About Pet Food, is rather unsuccessful. And high temperatures kill off essential enzymes, if there are any left, and alters the protein, making it more difficult for the cat's digestive system to recognise it as food. Yet a quality, species-specific diet is essential to good health. So it's unsurprising that cats suffer with health issues, both acute and chronic, when they're not getting the right nutrition. It's inevitable to all but the most robust of cats, and there really aren't many of those around anymore. Cats evolved on a fresh, raw diet of meat and bones. They hunt small animals, mice, rats, young rabbits, reptiles and birds, whatever they can catch. Then they consume the lot. Maybe not the beak or some of the big feathers, and of course some bits may be thrown out. That's the diet that keeps them healthy. But it also has to be very fresh. Cats aren't scavengers as dogs are. They only eat what they have just killed. This is the reason why cats are renowned for being very particular about their diet. You can dupe them once, but the second time round and their body remembers and says, oh no. And duping cats is necessary to get them to eat the garbage that's presented to them. Chemical engineers are clever at producing tastes and smells reminiscent of food. They fool us all the time, and they can even fool cats, but generally only once. When you've converted your cat, which can be smooth sailing or as difficult as converting junky kids, to a good quality raw meat and bones diet, they will be consistently eager, enthusiastic and excited about their meals, and they'll gobble up the food in record time. The result is improved energy and well-being, and normally this occurs quite quickly after the conversion. It's very satisfying, and it's a lovely reward, especially if you've had a hard time getting your head around the idea yourself, or you've had a hard time convincing your cat that this was the way to go. Check out the link at the bottom of the screen to get the lowdown on how to convert a cat to raw food and what suitable raw foods are. You can also purchase one of the growing number of raw pet foods now available, which is fantastic. But you may find your cat doesn't like some of them. They do tend to mix up different cuts of meat and often have far too large a content of fruit and veg, which are unsuitable for carnivores. They shouldn't have any fruit or veg in. This can be free-fed, but it should never be obligatory. Mixing all the food together can cause a problem. One of my cats hated liver and wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, so wouldn't eat the meal if liver was mixed in. It's unusual, as most love it, but we all have our preferences. And you'll need to keep your ear close to the ground if you use any of these brands, because the company can change the quality or they can sell up to somebody who's not as ethically minded. I like to be more in control of what I feed my cats. Certainly it's a bigger effort, but you learn to get it down pat after you've done it a few times. Although the diet is essential to good health, and it's powerful enough to resolve many issues, even chronic ones, it isn't the only part of holistic healthcare. Because of the unnatural way we live, the way cats are bred, and the generations of toxic veterinary abuse, extra help is often needed. And one of the best and the fastest ways is by using well-prescribed homeopathic treatment. So let's get into the germ theory versus the terrain theory. So the germ theory is the mainstay of the current medical model. Everything is blamed on the pathogen, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, a fungal, whatever. They love infections, and they dish out antibiotics like Smarties, whether it's for a bacteria or not. One person told me that the vet had prescribed antibiotics for her dog who they suspected had cancer. It just gets more and more bizarre. What's happening in the world currently is an excellent example. The terrain theory considers the health of the patient rather than the pathogen. In other words, you could consider the soil rather than the plant. The pathogen is of no interest, as our environment is teeming with pathogens, millions of them, that have no effect upon us at all, and they never have, providing the immune system is as it should be. It's the health of our immune system that has kept us on Earth, that has prevented us from dying out. But of course that doesn't sell, and you also have to take responsibility. People like the idea of a pill to cure all ills. They've been brainwashed into believing it's true, and people don't like the idea of taking responsibility because that takes effort. But as the great Einstein is famous for saying, a problem can't be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And just look at the result of this beautiful mouth. Isn't that absolutely stunningly healthy? So let's talk about restoring health rather than just managing disease. So the veterinary medicine is based on the outmoded germ theory. They try to fit everybody into one box and then treat them all the same. All those in the stomatitis box are treated by the same protocol, regardless of the cause, their sensitivity, their living conditions, their diet, etc. Those in the renal failure box have a different but still fixed protocol. It's easy for the vets to follow the protocol, but it usually fails the patient. Medicine only manages disease. Meds for life, very lucrative. And antibiotics for everyone and everything. A drug that kills off essential gut bacteria, so destroying the immune system. Homeopathy, on the other hand, considers every patient as the individual they are. Living conditions are considered, diet is considered, past traumas and treatments are considered. All are examined for lasting effects. Current and sometimes quirky signs and symptoms are taken seriously as they're telling us something. This is in the realm of the terrain theory, where anything and everything is possible. It's much more difficult to work with the unknown. Not everyone can do it or think they can't. This means that homeopathy has the potential for fully restoring health, whatever the medical label. It means that you can fire your homeopath once your cat is back on their feet, although you might kind of need us again for the odd acute problem. It may take a while to get there, but getting there is eminently possible. One thing that I do find a bit disturbing is that people like to treat their cat themselves. In a way, I endorse this, but only when you know what you're doing. And that only applies to acute conditions. You can't treat chronic conditions successfully without knowing what you're doing. What I find distressing is that people go to a vet, get a diagnosis, which can be and often is wrong, find the drugs don't work, so then they start giving their cat all manner of so-called natural medicine and supplements just because the very, very limited write-up of the medicine includes what the vet told them. Natural medicines include many therapies, all of which may take a therapist many years to learn. Some natural medicine is dangerous for cats, of which I find few therapists, including vets, are aware, such as herbs or any plant-based medicine, CBD oil, essential oils. Cats are carnivores. They have no need to deal with the alkaloids, the phenols, the terpenes found in plants, all of which are mild poisons that herbivores and omnivores easily deal with. Most supplements are a waste of money, as they are copycats in an isolated form, made from petrochemicals, of the nutrients in food. Even the natural ones are mostly unsuitable for cats, although they may be very effective for us. We're different species. What's good for us is most definitely not necessarily good for cats. One thing that has to be said here is that when you're in panic mode, when you're frightened or anxious, you'll never make the right decision. You'll make any decision that is suggested to you. That's why the medical profession in general always paint the bleakest picture to you, even though that may be as rare as hen's teeth. You're much more likely to comply with anything anyone tells you when you're anxious or frightened, especially for a loved one. So learn to be your own detective. Learn to be objective. Take copious amounts of the batch flower remedy, rescue remedy to stay calm and objective if you need to. Most people only get help when things have got bad, yet invariably, unless it's an accident, there have been warning signs. To boot, cats are stoic. They can hide what's going on. The combination can be unhelpful in knowing what's happening. This means you have to learn to be a good detective, alert to subtle signs and symptoms, Don't wait till an emergency presents itself. Subtle signs that show all is not well with your cat include soiling outside the litter tray, lethargy. Cats are not lazy, but they can be bored or they may need to sleep more to heal. Unusual behaviour in general, and in particularly towards you or other animals in the household, such as nipping, even biting you or themselves. Excessive grooming, OCD habits. Unusually thirsty when there is no apparent need, such as on a hot day or if fed dry food. These are showing you your cat is asking for help. Whether your vet can help is questionable. I've found that vets in general don't understand cats. Those distress signs are more important than a slight physical condition that a healthy cat can often heal themselves. Of course, it's always good to keep an eye on those mild conditions, just don't obsess about them. The biggest chronic health conditions cats suffer with include stomatitis and organ failure, in particular the renal system. Most of these conditions are man-made, they just don't occur in nature. The causes are the unsuitable food and the toxic veterinary drugs. And the living conditions can also be a factor when the cat's needs are not being met. The thing that only you can do is to change the diet. That really is your biggest job. Stop looking for ways to treat your cats yourself. Do the one thing nobody else can. Change the diet to a nutritious, species-specific one. That alone can be a big enough job for you, especially if you're entrenched in old, outmoded beliefs and habits. If things have got bad, seek the services of a true, and please be aware that many aren't, homeopathic professional. You'll know how true they are by what they recommend in the way of diet, what they offer you in the way of helpful therapy. I've heard of so-called holistic vets with dry food on sale from floor to ceiling, who administer antibiotics at the drop of a hat. The word holistic is used as a market exercise now to draw you in, so please be aware. The other thing only you can do is to be very aware of all the often very subtle signs and symptoms of your cat that a homeopath may not only find useful but essential to a good prescription. These two things that only you can do is enough. It'll keep your hands full. Leave the prescribing to those who know more. Working with the homeopath often takes time. Healing isn't an event. Healing is a process. Monitoring and possibly making changes are essential. However, the results can be well worth the wait. Homeopaths always aim to treat the whole patient. That's what holistic means, whole. Our aim is to heal the condition by healing the patient. And that means the restoration of the immune system, so your cat doesn't just get sick anymore. Once you have the diet down pat, once your cat is healing well under a professional homeopath, then you can consider learning about homeopathic home prescribing. Before that, it's likely to be overwhelming. You're just taking on too much. You can learn to use the common homeopathic remedies for acute conditions at home. It's empowering, it can save you bucket loads of cash, and you keep your sanity, which is quite nice. Now there's no need to panic because you have all the ducks lined up. The diet is in keeping with your cat's health. The homeopath knows the susceptibility of your cat, and you are able to take care of the acute conditions if and when they arise. It's an awesome place to find yourself in. So, to recap, my suggestions include making sure you're able to provide your cat with the most suitable environment possible. That's freedom, contact with nature, bolt holes, etc. Make sure the diet is a natural, species-specific and quality one, a priority if it isn't already. And it really is a priority. It's one of the mainstays of health because you're consuming it every day. Don't try to be your cat's therapist in chronic conditions. Leave that to those who can deal with it better. Instead, become a very good and very sensitive, objective observer of your cat's behaviour without trying to interpret it or putting your own spin on it. so your cat's therapist can help the healing process much more ably. With these 3 suggestions, you will have plenty to do, and I wish you well on your journey.